and she joins us now from New Brunswick. Welcome back to North Star. It's really good to see you again.
Great to be with you again, Ellen. Always good.
Now, our listeners might not know, but the New Brunswick Cottage is your home for the
That's
summer.
right. Well, my home for the summer, and it's where I was born, where I grew up, where I learned all of those wonderful values of community. And, I think where it taught me what I needed to know to become a diplomat. So it's always wonderful to come back home and get restored as I watch the Miramichi River float by.
Well, our listeners have been concerned as well as consterned about why you decided to leave 3 months early. Some for worried about your health, others for other reasons. Can you tell us why you stepped down 3 months before the end of the mandate?
I think it was simply time. This is a job that certainly from the beginning of October 2023 and after the horrific attack in Israel, really this job turned upside down, as I think the lives of many of us. And it was 24/7, Ellen, without question, for the first year, 24/7. And pretty much 24/6 for the second year, if not 24/7. And I think, you just work literally night and day. It's always on your mind. And as someone who had been a diplomat and abroad for about 13 years consecutively, coming home to Canada, trying to retire, not doing a good job of it, then going into a job like this, I think my family just said, okay, enough is enough, Mom, Grandma, you gotta just hang out with us and enjoy some of life. Now, having said that, Ellen, let me make really clear, I've left the position. Absolutely, I have left the position, and I've left it strong, I feel, with a strong base for my successor, and we can talk more about that.
Mm-hmm.
But I am not leaving the issue. I am not leaving, the compassionate United Canada that I insist we are going to continue to work hard for. I'm not leaving the issue of anti-Semitism or Holocaust remembrance. I will just find other ways of contributing and probably do it more on a part-time basis than 24/7.
So was it a health or mental health reason too, that just the strain and the stress, your family was worried? I picked that up from what you said.
Well, I think it was, I think I've always been pretty sturdy when it comes to mental health. There's no question that this job was one that tore at you physically and emotionally. I mean, I faced a lot of hate out there myself directed at me, a lot of nasty, words and in some cases actions. But I've dealt with that before in some of the conflict countries, conflict postings that I've had. I think, no, I think, I'm a maritimer. I didn't want to miss another maritime summer. As my sister jokingly said, Deborah, you got confused with Freedom 55. You thought it was Freedom 75. It's time. It's time. So,
How old are you now? Is that a mandatory retirement? Are you 75 now?
yeah, I'm 75. It's not mandatory retirement at all. I turned 75 in May. I'm a very young 75, people tell me. But
The Supreme Court justices have to leave at 75, which is why I brought it up, right?
Well, sure, and so do our senators. I think. But no, it wasn't mandatory in any way. It was just simply the fact that at some point you have to stop a little bit and I think just, restore your batteries, get a little bit of the joy back into life. This was every day waking up to a fight. And I mean, every day waking up to a fight and having a lot of people angry at you all the time. And by that, I mean, people on all sides of this discussion and debate. There are multiple layers to what we have gone through in the last 2 years. I learned a lot, Ellen, and I think that learning is not something I want to just put in a box and store in the basement. I want to continue to contribute. I think I learned a lot about courage. I think I learned a lot about bystanders and how, as the saying goes, the mark of a country is not the courage of its military, it is the courage of its bystanders. So
And how is Canada doing in that
well,
regard?
well, that is part of the examination that I'm going to be doing along with some other people. I would say
Wait. Don't go far. I need to understand. What does that look like? What do you mean? You've been hired to do something, a
no, I
final
haven't been.
report or what?
No. But during this period, these last 2 years, I've been really quite amazed and often become quite despondent and despairing about the fact that it was hard to get people to speak up and to speak clearly, to speak with clarity, to speak with conviction about what we were seeing happening here on Canadian soil. Yes, there are all kinds of issues with what's happening in the Middle East, and we should be directing ourselves to those issues as well. But if we can't deal with what's happening in a growing hatred on our own soil, what does that say about us? Not just as leaders, by the way, but as everyday citizens. So, it was a constant discussion with people about, why are you not standing up? Why are you not saying something? What do you need? And I guess, Ellen, I would say that what I did find is that there were things that people needed in order to feel comfortable enough to stand up. And I think that's
what would that look? What do they need?
And I'm going to speak to that. But I guess what I'm saying is I think we need to do more work on it. They needed help in finding the right words, because people became, partly because of social media, but not just social media, people became concerned about, but if I say this, am I going to insult somebody else? Am I going to hurt somebody else? Like, what is the right tone that I should take? And then when it came to actions, what would be the right actions? Because if I do this for this community, do I have to do it for another community? Or does it look like I'm favoring one over the other? I had one of the ministers say to me I was very impressed with him, our former Minister of Defense, Minister Blair. And he said, in different times in my political career, when a community is hurting, I stand up for that community. And then when another community is hurting, I stand up and I stand with that community. I say to each of these communities, I haven't left you. It is just that this is the community that needs me the most right now, and I need to take a stand and be courageous. And I was very impressed with him for saying that. I didn't get that clarity from business leaders who I asked many times to stand up. And I was incredibly disappointed with business leaders. And I have to say, we have a tendency to want to blame politicians all the time. But where have the faith leaders been? Where have the priests and ministers and rabbis and imams and so forth, where have they been bringing us all back together as children of God?
Well, I know recently, June 24th, there was a summit of
fabulous
700 Christians and Jews. This is the Simeon Summit, which the media wasn't invited to, but we know about it. Yeah,
I was certainly invited to it, and unfortunately couldn't make it, but my staff were there, and Andrew Bennett did, as Andrew does, a fantastic job with many people.
We've had him on our show too. Amazing, Father Bennett.
Absolutely excellent. And I mean, Andrew and I talked about this effort back a year and a half ago. I think also, educators standing up, teachers standing up, university presidents. We've gone through this many different times, but also just the everyday citizen, reaching out to the Jewish community and saying, how can I be helpful? I want to hear what you're going through and so forth. So I think as a result of, watching and being a part of all this happening and having, in many cases, not just a front row seat, but being in the ring as the battle was raging, I actually connected with a number of other people who've been studying the whole aspect of bystanders. And what does this mean throughout history? And I think it's something right now that Canada has to be thinking about. And again, what is it that makes it so difficult? Hate is not car theft. It's not even tariffs, which are tangible, concrete, and you can somehow get your head around addressing that issue. Hate is a little more amorphous and obtuse. And I think, frankly, we're struggling with how do we face it head on and address it. And I think that that's something we've got to do a lot more thinking about, and we need to improve our performance.
So are you giving Canadians a failing grade on standing up to hate?
I'm not sure. No, I don't think I would give Canadians a failing grade on that. I think we are still one of the most spectacular countries when it comes to a decent society, when it comes to social programs, when it comes to caring for one another. I think this recent test in these last 2 years have brought us a little bit to our knees. And I think that I wouldn't give it a failing, but I certainly wouldn't give it top mark.
Is it fixable? You
Oh, yeah.
struggled in the ring for 2 years and
Is
you're
it?
leaving and with heavy heart. You said those words.
Yeah.
Tell
Yeah.
me
Oh,
why you use those words.
well, I use those words because I would love to continue in the job, and because it's wonderful, as a special envoy, as I've spoken to other potential candidates for the job, I said it was without question the toughest job I ever did, uh, including my time in conflict countries. Uh, but it
Our
was,
listeners should know it was like Afghanistan and
well,
but
yeah, and a few
Israel.
others. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would say that it was the most meaningful and um, the most powerful, in the sense that you get to see the underbelly of society. You get to see where we're strong, but you particularly get to see where we're weak, and you get to work on those issues. So even though pretty much every day ends with a level of dissatisfaction because you never got enough done and because more issues arose than you could deal with, but you could feel that you were at least making a contribution that was critical, however sparse it may be at the moment, but you were also getting an exceptional understanding of where we are weakening as a society, not just us, the Western world. Frankly, I think the whole world is tilted these days, and we're continuing to tilt. And we're going to have to figure out a way of getting us back to our center, back on course, because it's pretty scary out there, not just for our Jewish community, but certainly, my empathy is with my Jewish families, my Jewish community. But I think what is ever happening to our Jewish community is happening to all of us. So we've got to pay a lot of attention to how we address hate. And we're not doing enough of it. I'm confident that we made strides. There's no question. I'm happy with what we got done. But as I said, I'm not going to leave the issue. I'm going to continue to work in the issue. I'm going to spend some time this summer thinking through what areas I'll focus on. But we need much more of a full court press.
You said earlier, and I want to pick up on something that I've been curious about. You said you got a lot of hate. Your predecessor and colleague and mentor, Erwin Kotler, had death threats against him. He had to be on 24/7. Is that what you were alluding to, that you personally also had death threats too?
Well, look, what my
Like credible RCMP type or, death threats, as
no,
opposed
no,
to
no,
the
no.
the people that scream at you when you speak,
Right.
at events.
So let's be clear. What Erwin has had to deal with is something quite separate and
Okay.
distinct, and involves particular country. And the incredible work Erwin has done
Right.
as a human rights advocate in the world, taking care of people all over the
Right.
continents. In my particular case, it was nasty stuff on social media, of course, some threatening emails, some going into events, as you said, speeches and so forth. In some cases, losing colleagues, in some cases losing friends who were not happy with me doing the job and thought that I
Really?
was. So, I mean, just the kind of thing that, you have to deal with when you are in the middle of a critical issue that is fraught with multiple emotions from so many different perspectives. This is an issue that brings with it 100,000 opinions. And it's further complicated, as you well know, with the situation going on in the Middle East. And so we're going to continue, I think, to have a pretty tough battle on our hands for the next year or two. But what I'm hoping Canada will do, we'll do right by our Jewish community. We'll do right by all our communities. I think we've had incredible progress in the last 50 years, and we can't lose that. But I think this past 2 years has taught us not to be complacent, that there are many areas now that need additional attention and additional fixing, whether we're talking about people not understanding anti-Semitism, so more training is needed, examination of policies and programs to make sure that they do not have inbuilt anti-Semitism. We're even finding surveys have their own sort of kind of structured isolation built into them. And so that's almost a whole new science that's opening up that we're going to be exploring. So there's just, and not to mention law enforcement, not to mention our legislation, not to mention how our ministers and members of parliament communicate, and not to mention, and this is critically important, Ellen, and this is where I spent many frustrating days, and that is getting the three levels of government, the federal, provincial, and municipal, to work together on the issue of growing hate. Why it was so much easier for them to come together around car theft, auto theft, and have a massive, important summit on it and put in place dedicated prosecutors right across the country. Again, it's tangible. It's concrete. They could address that. But we have not been able, I think, to get the three levels of government as yet coming together in a common front to address hate.
You had the Antisemitism Forum
That
in
was
March, right
exceptional.
before the election, and then there was one in 2021 under Trudeau as well. And then the minister who ran it was dumped from cabinet.
Okay, but hang on.
Dumped. It was like, okay, check that box off. So they did get together.
No. Okay.
Three levels of government.
Okay, but
I'm just saying.
But no. Let me clarify. First of all, the summit in 2021 was a summit on anti-Semitism. Full stop.
Right.
The summit in March of this year was a summit on anti-Semitism and law enforcement.
Right.
And Minister Ben-Dayan did a brilliant job, as did Minister McGuinty, and by the way, as did Minister Varney, the Minister of Justice. The three of them attended the full meeting, put an enormous amount of effort into having it happen. But they were trying to get it done as an election, as a leadership campaign was underway, and then as election was about to be called. So it happened in short order. It did not become a full federal, provincial, municipal gathering conference to address hate. It did, though, bring elements, certainly the federal elements, and elements of the provincial and municipal people together. Not all of them. You couldn't possibly do the preparation you needed in that short order. But what happened, Ellen, and you watch this, and because I can assure you my team that I'm leaving are going to be watching it, and I will as well, and I've spoken to the incoming ministers about this, the commitments made by the federal government in the press release coming out of that conference are truly exceptional. They're talking there about reviewing legislation to determine what might need to change, if any. They're talking about
bubble legislation.
Legislation. I mean, it was a huge success. And for that, Minister Ben-Dayan, former Minister Ben-Dayan, Minister McGuinty, and Minister Varney really just deserve a huge, recognition. Now, those commitments that have been made, they even talk about having an action plan that identifies what else needs to be done, and more importantly, where they will be reporting publicly on those commitments. And frankly, Prime Minister Carney is already committed to bubble legislation publicly, as well as more money going into security infrastructure. So, we got a huge step forward with that forum. And for that, again, I recognize those three ministers. What we need, though, is much, much more attention from the provinces and the municipalities working with the feds on this, not just in terms of law enforcement, but in terms of the larger environment. What are we doing in our schools? What are we doing in our universities? What are we doing in our workplace? We are now involved with tremendous support, frankly, from the deputy ministers federally in looking at very solid anti-Semitism training for senior managers in the federal government, not just in terms of ensuring a more inclusive workplace, Ellen, but actually helping people look at programs and policies to ensure that they have the balance that's needed.
Okay, you mentioned this government, let me ask you about Prime Minister Carney. And I know, to preface this, you had regular meetings with former Prime Minister Trudeau when you were in the job at the beginning. Have you met Carney? How regularly do you meet? Have you not met? Tell me about what his deal is as far as anti-Semitism and Canadian Jews.
So, unfortunately, Prime Minister Carney asked me for a meeting. His staff got in touch with me to say that he wanted to meet with me, but it was after my departure date. Like I had already sent in my departure letter for July the 8th. So his calendar was of course pretty crazy, and we couldn't make the meeting happen before I left. But the request came from him, not from me. So I was very pleased with that. Further to that, I have been talking to senior officials in his PMO almost from the week they got elected. I mean, I don't have to name them, but I mean, his senior person on the foreign policy file, 2 or 3 of his
Scott Gilmore for our listeners.
All right, okay, Scott Gilmore, and a number of staff working with Scott. His new chief of staff, Marc-André Blanchard, is a personal friend. I'm very impressed, Ellen, with the outreach that I received, and I'm sure this is true of others, including my counterpart on Islamophobia, but I'm very impressed with the outreach that I received from PMO. I probably spoke to them when was the election? The end of April, May, June, July. In that period of time, I probably spoke to them, I don't know, 15, 20 times. And these are long conversations. We worked on a number of different issues together. Minister Guilbeault reached out to me. I've had a couple of wonderful meetings with him. He is a brilliant chief of staff. We're almost speaking daily. Minister Anand got in touch with me right away and asked for a meeting, and then put me on a personal email and was back and forth with me all the time. I say all, and not only that, as I said, the parliamentary secretary, Latenzio from Montreal, who is really quite exceptional, parliamentary secretary for justice, got in touch with me. I didn't request it, she did, asked for a briefing, and then after the briefing said, wow, let's please continue this, and I will obviously be available to them. So I guess the point I'm making is that I am getting an enormous amount of attention from this new government. Our team has gotten an enormous amount of attention, an exceptional amount of communication. And I'm not just saying this to make people feel good. I'm telling you the facts. And what I'm getting, Ellen, which I particularly like, is what I call active attention. It's not just like, let's talk. Not that was the case with the previous government, but particularly I am struck by how, as a new government coming in, they're going, okay, what do we need to do? What do we need to do to get this right?
But there hasn't been like photo ops, and this is a criticism that you've read too, but Vivian Berkovich, you didn't go to the Nova Festival with Carney and didn't go to the various events where, there was a lot more photo ops with the other one. That's all. And I'm just going to leave it there because it's not my criticism. It's from other journalists.
And you know what? I was pretty busy getting out a report on K-12, doing the follow-up from the forum, making sure that we were doing the work inside government that we have to do on the handbook, dealing with the conference in Israel on anti-Semitism, preparing for the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance conference. So, I frankly think as well that I don't measure my progress on photo ops. Maybe people do, and if they do, I wish them luck in their progress. But for us, we were busy getting a lot of solid work done, and never did I ever feel neglected by the Prime Minister's office, not for a second. If anything, I had a much more engaged conversation and action plan in place with them than I'd had in the previous 6 months.
Understood. You mentioned that you're working towards finding a successor. So that means that they're going to replace you. It's not finished. That's not cutting, like Polyev wanted to pull the position, remember? Candidate Polyev said they would cancel both yours and the special representative for Islamophobia's position. What should we know?
Yeah, it was regrettable. I tried to meet with Mr. Polyev when I was in the job, and in the end, I got a response that he was too busy to meet with me and wished me good luck in my work, which was kind of unfortunate, but also kind of reflects the way in which sometimes this conversations gets a little too
Wait, so he
politically.
never met with you at all in 2 years that you were there?
No, we didn't. We met at the Parliament buildings when my colleague Michael Kotler was in town, and we had a very good conversation. He was very engaging. We had a great time. And as you know, he's got some fantastic members in his party who've been very active with me, Melissa Lanceman in particular, and Shuv and some others. I mean, they've been really, really active and really helpful, but then but at that time, when I first met him in the Parliament, he said, Deborah, let's get together. Please call my office and so forth. So we did, and we put in the request, and then got word that it wasn't going to happen. So that's it.
All right. So what about the replacement? There's going to be? You got a commitment that they're going to replace you?
Oh, I'm very confident that they're going to replace me. Absolutely, no question. And we've talked about several different candidates. Yeah, and I'm hoping it'll come fairly soon. It's hard to make these things happen because it's an order, or it's a governor and council appointment, so it takes some time to get all the paperwork done. But yeah. We've looked at some really, really excellent candidates, and I've had lots of conversations with Minister Guilbeault's office as well as Minister Anand's office, and certainly with PMO on this. They're very, very much on it.
Okay, I have two fast questions. One is an easy one, and one is you need to think a little bit more. So I'll do the easy one first. What was left unfinished that you want us to know, that kind of is a regret that because you just mentioned the K-12 report, which was very well covered, and you did the IRA handbook, which was a big thing for your mandate. But when you met me the very first time, I remember I looked it up, November 2023, like a few weeks after you got into office, you said your priority was students on campus and gathering data. So what's up with that?
Okay, so I think on gathering data, we did quite well. I think both the hate crimes units across Canada have done a really excellent job, and Stats Canada, with, again, more money from the government, are doing a really good job. We're getting better data, and we're getting it faster. More importantly, Ellen, we're doing research. That's what the K-12 was about, and other work that we've had underway with Jack Jedwab and others. We need more research on this subject, and of course, ADL has done some great stuff. So I would like to I would love to stay and do more research on the subject, because I think we need to explore it more in terms of where it's coming from, where's anti-Semitism coming from, what are the best ways to fight it, etc. So, but on data, we had some progress. On university students, I guess one of the things that became really clear to me is that this is really the domain of university administrators and of provincial governments. I've certainly done some work with the granting councils federally, and we've got some excellent work underway there. We've been doing training with them on anti-Semitism. We've been looking at how they set up their selection processes and so forth. Great cooperation from them, from Shirk and a number of the others. And Shirk, yeah. I did a presentation to the Tri-Council leaders. I'm confident that on the federal side, we've tackled the area where we have some influence, and we're going to continue to work with them. But again, good cooperation. I think that we've seen some improvements on the university campuses. I think there's still more work to be done. And again, I think we need to do a bit of a deeper understanding. Where I would like to spend more time is on the whole area of the K-12 right across the country. I think we've got good ministers of education who are putting in place solid Holocaust remembrance curricula, but we need to address anti-Semitism specifically, and therefore we need the training in place. And I've been really impressed with Minister Calandra
in Ontario.
His response to that report was excellent. His team was terrific when we briefed them.
They put it on hold for a year when they took over Toronto School Board, and they took over Ottawa School Boards. All that new stuff that was supposed to be mandatory is now on hold because they're trying to. So that's a whole other story.
There's things to deal with there, but let me mention one other area.
Yeah.
I would like to do more on a respective dialogue, because one of my great regrets is that we did not come together as a nation the way we could have and should have. And I feel that I'm a part of that gulf. And it hurts me to think that I was a part of that gulf, that people didn't want to meet with me because of the job I was in. They didn't want to have the discussions with me. I held back from having some discussions because I knew there was going to be animosity or wasn't going to be welcome in the room. And it disappoints me. So I mean, I'm talking to a number of really good people who have done some work already on respectful dialogue. This is where I really do want to focus, and where I think, frankly, all Canadians need to focus.
Right. And I asked you at the beginning, and I'm going to just be totally transparent. Not today, but 2 years ago, I said, let's try to get an interview with your counterpart, the three of us online, and talk about Islamophobia and anti-Semitism and how we can. And you said it's not happening. They just don't want to. And I'm
Well,
wondering,
well, I would never speak for Amira. I mean, she could say yes or no about it, but I think at that,
together.
yeah,
And you even appeared with her early on in your career. You made a point to try to go together with her to events to be solidarity. And I'm
right.
wondering how that dialogue has continued, if at all, to now, or is it so far apart right now that it's too
But
fraught? Nobody's talking. I'm just curious in that
oh,
specific relationship.
okay, to be clear, she also tried. I mean, this wasn't just me alone. Amira also tried, of course. And I mean, we were
Got pushed back because they told her not to talk to you in public. Right?
well.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. Let's be clear. Neither my community nor her community were happy all the time to see us in pictures together.
Correct.
So we were responding to the reactions of our communities as well. At the beginning, before October, she and I were going to travel together to meet with provincial ministers of education. We had great plans. We'll get back to that one day in another format, I'm hoping. And again, this comes back to respectful dialogue. All those good people who did reach out to me and say, let's engage more on this. I was over there fighting fires and try to keep people from burning, and had other work I had to be doing. And also, there were often people who just simply didn't want me participating in respectful dialogues or wouldn't come into the room. So that's history now. Let's move on.
Okay. I always like to try to find a silver lining, if anything. So at the end of this conversation, is there one anecdote or story or person you met that gives you some kind of hope that we can ask? I know I should have told you before so you could think about it, but take your time. Because maybe not, but
well, yeah, I mean, there were many people who I met who gave me hope. But there were too many others who dampened that hope. I'm particularly, no, I'm not going to mention names. I would say that that we spent way too much time in the negative and much less in the positive. Everybody who was engaged in this drama that is still unfolding. I think that it was the people who stood up, and I don't want to mention one name, because if I do, I'll forget another name. And
it's like your Academy Awards speech, you forget,
yeah.
right? Unless you write it down.
But also I think that I think there were a number of people who were out there trying very hard to work on behalf of their communities to a better place, both in the political world and in the community leadership. And I think those people who were trying to move forward on respectful dialogue, I just think that we were constantly dealing with not so much a question of tone deaf, but it's just that people were listening and hearing on different frequencies. And so we just were not connecting. So that was where the big despair comes from. But there are a number of people out there who are continuing to push to try to bring those frequencies merging. And I think, frankly, Prime Minister Carney's going to work pretty hard to make that happen, from what I hear him say, and certainly the ministers I've spoken to. But I think there's a lot of people across Canada who will be joining us in that effort. But we got to get there soon. I never could have imagined that 2 years into this job, we would still have this degree of divisiveness. So lots to get done. And I'm going to go back out there after a good maritime summer and at least work part-time and keep at it, as I know you will, Ellen.
Well, I'm very appreciative of all the work you've done, and it's not an easy job to be out there. I know you had to face at the beginning the Jewish community saying, "But she's not even Jewish. Why would they appoint her?
Yeah.
She's not even Jewish." Are
Yeah.
you over that insult now?
I was never insulted by that. Never. I mean, I never. I mean, I frankly would never have taken this job if that kind of comment could have hurt me, could have insulted me. I never would have taken the job if I didn't understand that to have a non-Jew fight at this particular time for the Jewish community in a country like Canada was exactly the right thing to do. Now, I surrounded myself with fabulous staff, most of whom are Jewish, but not all, and with all kinds of advisors, many of whom were Jewish, but not all. But I have said that I think that the next person replacing me probably should be Jewish, and then maybe after that, non-Jewish, who knows? I do think that this cannot be seen as Jews having to fight for themselves. This is a matter of Canadians fighting for Jewish Canadians and for all of Canada. That's what this is about. When I'm doing this work, I'm doing it as much for a Christian child, a Muslim child, a Sikh child, a Hindi child, an Indigenous child, a Jewish child, because it's about the kind of Canada we need to have, where we're not cruel with one another, where we care about one another. And when we see someone hurting and in pain and being abandoned by our society, we step in. I was never insulted by that. Never, ever, ever. In fact, I would have people come up to me after speeches and events and so forth and say, "I'm just so sorry that you ever had to deal with anybody saying that. You folks are working so hard." But it was okay. I understood it. I understand it, Ellen.
I understand it. So why do you think the next one should be Jewish?
Because I think that, in fairness, alternate it, like shift it around. We should be demonstrating that we fight for one another. We're not going to corral people into their battlefields and say, only you can fight for yourselves because the rest of us are off, picking blueberries or going to hockey games. Like, grow up, people. Grow up and care and look after our children and look after their future, because there's a little bit of jeopardy at play here.
It's been an honor to work with you these past 2 years. Thank you for taking the time again to speak with us and the Jewish community on the CJN's North Star podcast.
Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the fall. We'll get into a little bit of trouble together, Ellen.